For me.
Sure. Sit there if you want. Hi, everybody. I guess we'll get started. First of all, my name is Jim Niles. I'm on the town council here, and my role is liaison to our water treatment projects and boards and stuff like that. Let's start off by please rise and we'll salute the flag. The flag's over in the corner. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Bear with me for just a minute. I'll kind of lay out how we're going to conduct this informal meeting. I'd like to introduce our panel. And before I even start introducing, thank them for coming. They are taking time out of their schedules to come and help us disseminate information, to answer questions. They all have experience to perform with Priscillacor. From Minerva, we have Steve McNally. He's the supervisor. Town board member Dave Labar. They're down on the end. Oh, excuse me. From Saratoga Lake, we have Dean Long. From Lake Sunnyside, Eric Sage. From Glen Lake, Paul Derby. From Lake Luzerne, Jane Oppenlander. And on the end is Glenn Sullivan. He's the project manager for Solitude Lake Management. Also in attendance is Tracy Clothier. She's our watershed manager. Our town supervisor, Gene Merlino's hiding over there in the back. And town councilman Paul Wadowski is here. Our town clerk is also here, Cindy Sherwood. The meeting objective, as I kind of already stated, is really to give an informal setting where we can talk. When it's time to have a public hearings are one way. Talk to the board. Not a discussion. This is intended to be a discussion. In order to make it productive, I've kind of outlined how we're going to work through the meeting to get as much information swapped back and forth as possible. But keep that in mind, that's the main reason for the meeting, is for everybody here to learn. I'm still learning. Hopefully within a month or so, the board will actually vote on this. The meeting format, first of all, this is not a town board meeting. It's not a public hearing. That's semantically important in the laws of New York State. No decisions are going to be made tonight. Nobody's going to vote on anything. And I'll do my best to serve as moderator. If you don't like what I'm doing, I'll hand you the mic and you can do it. We want to start the meeting off. Each speaker in the order of the table is going to talk for 3, 4, 5 minutes to tell us who they are, what their expertise is, and what their experience is with this product. Glenn, on the end, will probably need the most time because he's the technical guy that's actually contracted with us to prepare our applications with NCON and with the APA. At the end of the little talks, that's when we'll open it up for discussion. Do we have anybody on Zoom, Chris?
We do.
Okay, so in order for people on Zoom to hear us, you're going to have to talk into this. Okay, so I'm going to pass this around. There's a little button on it. If you got to sneeze or something, just put that button, push that button. If the green light's on, it's live. Okay, that means obviously we can hear in the room, but it also means folks on Zoom can hear. And it's being recorded.
Yes.
So that's important. One more little background information before we start our discussions. The application process so far has gone fairly well. We submitted our application February 20th to NCON, New York State Environmental Conservation. That day, we also mailed out the required notification letter that we were applying to the NCON. that went to 97 property owners on the lake and on Mill Creek. So empties out of the lake down into the river. Our APA application was submitted on March 10th. And they asked for some more info. We got that to them. And on March 28th, they determined that our application was complete. On March 29th, the APA sent out their notification letter to the same 97 folks on the mailing list. And that's where that stands right now. We're on the agenda for the May 11th Adirondack Park Agency meeting. One other thing I want to tell you is that APA's comment period ends tomorrow. If you want to comment to the APA, there are several ways you can do it. If you're computer literate, unlike me, then you can go on their website and you can submit a comment right directly. You don't have to write a letter and scan it or anything. Or you can mail it to them, but over there are the forms if you want to put a comment in directly via email. On the town website, you'll find a frequently asked question sheet that we put on the website March 27th. That has 2 pages of issues and kind of layman terms, answers to questions, which may be some of the questions that'll come up tonight. The next step will be the town board, probably in May, we'll have a public hearing. That public hearing will be formal. It'll be where the public can give us input. But basically, there's virtually no dialogue at that point. It's just tell us what you think, and then the town board will act on it at that point. Pretty sure that'll be in May. If the town board approves the project and the state issues the permits, 2 big ifs, okay, we're in control right now. Then the plan is to contract to Solitude and do the actual installation in late May or early June. It'll take 1 day to do the installation. Currently, just to put in the back of your mind, the town is spending, last year we spent $52,000 to have divers come and pluck weeds out of the lake. The year before that, or 2 years before that, was mid-40s. Don't quote me, I think 45,000, 47,000. The Priscilla Core installation is estimated to be approximately 37,000, and they offer a 3-year guarantee. So from an economic standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for the town to do this. But we certainly realize there are other issues besides economics on this. So that said, I'm going to pass this mic to Steve and Dave and let them start telling us about themselves and their experience.
Okay. Hi, my name is Steve McNally. I'm the supervisor in the town of Minerva. We have a less than 100-acre lake. It's a man-made lake, so it's very shallow and it is ideal for milfoil growth. We've fought the milfoil problem now for 15, 17 years. We've spent over $500,000 with matting and diving. And in 2020 or 19, we started the process to try the Priscilla Core. Glenn has been a real asset. We were the first lake in the Adirondack Park to get it approved. We got treated in May of 2020, and it's basically been a silver bullet. They say there's no silver bullets, but at least this got us back on track. We were losing the battle, and it's getting difficult. If you think it's hard finding somebody to serve soft ice cream at a store, try to find a diver. You know, they're very expensive. Milfoil is just like having a garden. You get good years for growth and bad years for growth. It seemed like we had a good year every year, and we would get ahead of it and then we'd lose it. So, but I can blab all night about our success on this or so far, but the main thing is be open-minded about this. I've been to these public hearings, or this isn't a hearing, but we've been through this we're in the town I live in, we had 80 people there screaming at us about Roundup. How, they're still using Roundup today, by the way, but, just be open-minded about this and listen to the science and the data, and that's the secret. And another thing is, I think we were successful and we continue to be successful, and we're very transparent with this. Any information, get that information out to the people. People will listen to you, but be transparent and be open-minded. And, this may be just what you're looking for to get you back on target. We've been very happy, and Dave, basically is a scientist here, so he can fill you in.
And I'm not the scientist, but I was pretty well the project manager for our town. And I had property on the lake, and I witnessed the lake and the growth of the milfoil. I was involved in the first hand harvesting and removal of the milfoil with AIM, the first divers that we hired. So I probably could field a lot of questions as to how it grows, how it spreads, and then what techniques we used. We went through the benthic barriers. We went through the physical hand harvesting. We put AIM in business with their first hookah rig and hauled it off in our own John boats and to our landfill. How to deal with that. We then went to suction harvesting after we got kind of a handle on it on our lake, and we lowered our budget and our time commitment, and then it grew profusely again, and we lost control of it. So then we went to the dash harvesting, diver assisted suction harvesting it is. And at that point we seemed to be gaining on it, but then it grew so much faster. Our lake, as we said, it's about 8 feet deep on average. It's 80 acres in milfoil. It's a feeding bed for milfoil, any kind of growth really. So milfoil thrived in that environment, and it gets warm. So practically speaking, the treatment went well. After we have had 3 years of a clear lake, we did in the fall of our 3rd year spot a few single stem plants. And we're going to deal with them through hand harvesting now this summer. So hopefully, but it was a point where we ended up treating 60% of our lake, and that's how dense it was. We tried a lot of different strategies, from the heaviest beds first, and then the moderate density beds, and then the singles here and there. We had it seeding on our lake and spreading that way. We had it decomposing and spreading that way. So I could answer a lot of practical questions about how hand harvesting, suction harvesting, and the chemical will go. I don't want to go on too much more, but we had a lot of success and a lot of with the Procellacor. We had the public hearing went well. A lot of anxious people. We had a landscape contractor downstream who was very concerned about and nursery that was concerned about their water supply. We tested in and around there, the downstream area, and really no residual whatsoever, and they never had an issue with it. So there would be a lot of concerns from the public to be answered, but maybe perhaps I can field some of those when we get through.
Hi, I'm Dean Long. I'm a consultant to the Saratoga Lake Protection and Improvement District. I've been involved with Eurasian water milfoil since 1985, when it was discovered on Lake George. I'll talk about a couple of things relevant to Lake Luzerne, as part of this introduction, and a little bit about Saratoga Lake. Saratoga Lake, of course, had a milfoil problem that was, a far different scale than what Lake Luzerne is dealing with, or what Minerva Lake was dealing with. At Saratoga Lake, it's a 4,000 acre lake. There was probably between 400 to 600 acres worth of milfoil on it. That was being, harvested, annually. The harvesting program started in 1986 and continues to today. So back in 1998 is when I became involved heavily with SLIPID, working on watershed management plans, relooking at herbicide programs. There was a test application of sonar in 2003, then in 2006, working with ACT, which was one of the predecessors of Solitude, et cetera. We proposed and worked up a plan to do a segmented whole lake treatment. In that treatment program, we did 3 years, 220 odd acres of chemical applications on Saratoga Lake to control the erosion water milfoil. First year was with sonar, worked on the south end, worked very well. Didn't have any huge problems, didn't have any unusual kill-offs of the other natives, et cetera. The second year we went to renovate. Again, worked very well. The application was not an ideal day. It was windy, a little bit windier than probably should have been, but it was probably our most successful year. And then the third year was renovate. So basically by 2009, we had eliminated, the 400 some odd acres of continuous milfoil beds down to the point where we just had individual selective spot locations of milfoil. People could navigate freely from their docks. The natives recovered. The natives were very important to the whole process. Since 2009, we did spot treatments using all the varieties of chemicals. And then finally, once Procellicor was approved, we did 2 Procellicor applications. The great thing about Procellicor is that it's a small dose. It's a dose that can be put down very quickly. We are doing 60 acres in about 2.5 hours, which is great because then you can put it down in the morning when things are nice and calm, and the material goes quickly onto the beds and gets uptaken by the milfoil. The other thing that we have found out on Saratoga Lake using a variety of chemicals and Procellicor, et cetera, is that frequently, because we're trying to be very conservative and careful, we're tending to use a lower dose or the lower end of doses, and you really need to be at the medium high dose so that you ensure that you get good comprehensive control. And it's a hard decision that Glenn and his folks are well experienced at looking at both here in New York State and in Vermont. So it's one of the things that everybody has to wrestle with chemicals. So up here, I'll talk about Lake Luzerne because I also assisted Lake Luzerne in some project works in 2019. So, and the reason I wanted to bring this up as a couple is that this was the distribution of the milfoil back then. And the first slide that was up here earlier showed the current distribution, which is much broader. You can go to the next slide and I can finish up. So this is now, this is the previous one, and you can see how much the milfoil has expanded throughout the lake. So, which works well for the targeting program, et cetera. And one of the considerations, of course, with making the plan is that this is the inlet area, and then exactly how to go at it to control that area when you've got the water coming in. Hopefully you'll have a couple good 4 days before when it's nice and dry, and a couple of days after or a day afterwards, and everything will be fine. The next slide. The important thing here is that you've got a strong group of natives. The natives are important because once you control the milfoil, you want other plants to grow rapidly and crowd them out. That's what we found out on Saratoga Lake. Everybody's going to complain because all of a sudden you're going to have the potamogetons, the pond weeds, burst up and get bigger. And everybody hates them, but those are the best plants for the fish, the best plants for the lake. And they will recover. They're not going to be affected by the Priscilla core at all. You know, some people say they are. We've never seen any impacts of Priscilla core on any of the native pond weeds. So, you know, you're in a good shape here on Lake Luzerne because you have a good, strong native community now. We'll continue to have a good, strong native community. What was the last slide? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's just another picture of the distribution. And the key thing here, you know, is how, you know, and then this was years ago. You know, I think this was immediately after the renovate treatment. So that's another, yeah. Oh, that's a Barracum. Oh, okay. Right. So you have a few, you have 3 different native milfoils. They're probably going to be impacted slightly. But again, the other plants are going to recover and you have a good, strong plant community. So, you know, as far as all the, you know, technical approaches, the advantages and disadvantages, et cetera, is all stuff I've dealt with. You know, at Saratoga Lake, we've written 3 management plans for, you know, for the harvesting program, et cetera, over the years, because that's how, because we're, you know, we're a special tax district. That's how the tax district determines its directions over the coming years. So, glad to be here and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dean. Eric?
Yes, good day. My name is Eric Sage. I'm the president of Protective Association for Lake Sunnyside. That's in Queensbury. Just about myself real quick. After I retired from the Air Force, I decided to become an environmental scientist because of milfoil. That had a lot to do with it. So I've been working on milfoil in Lake Sunnyside for about 13 years. We did like 3 sonar treatments, and we had a whole variety of hand harvesting companies come out and do work for us as well. The thing is, what I bring to the table is from 2009 to about 2013, I did a study on Eurasian milfoil. It's independent, just me and some of the residents. I was diving, doing all the hand harvesting myself. And with surface support from, you know, these, the other property owners, what I did was I worked it with the sonar treatments. And what happened was I was very successful in actually gaining a ground. I had about 15% of the lake when we originally had monoculture of just pure milfoil. What I was able to do was, because we were doing sonar treatments, after the, you know, when the plants started to come back and they were small, it was easy to pick them up. And even when they did get big, I started to understand the dilemmas that hand harvesters face when it comes to removing plants. Because what they do is they produce vast root systems. And you can pull out the plant and you give it 2-3 weeks later, and now you have 5 little plants from the roots that are left. And so I basically learned all of this sort of stuff, you know, firsthand. I was doing surveys and documenting all my results. So I had a lot of lessons learned. And I think number 1 is you got to have a really good invasive species management plan, just like this gentleman was explaining. And it has to be dynamic, and it takes, you know, the community to participate in this. This is not something that, I mean, yes, you can have, you know, a third party do an invasive management plan, but you know, it helps when we are involved ourselves, so we understand what's going on, what we see. And when decisions are made, we're informed and we can make better decisions. As an example, you can see up here on the lake, we had done a treatment in 2014 of sonar, which was incredibly successful. Thing is that we didn't have any plants. It was actually, we had vast areas of what we call a secondary succession, which is there's no plants whatsoever. There were very few natives sparsely around the lake. The fish managed to come back, and the native species came back, and we had hand harvesters working on the lake. And things were working out all right at first, but it started to get out of control. And eventually, this is what we ended up with in 2020. This is a survey that I personally performed myself. And all of these little dots are all the little plants around the lake. This is what I used for the property owners so that they could understand this is how bad the lake is. You may not see it because a lot of these plants are in deeper depths, but this is the case. So this is where we're at. And so when we had to make a decision, it's like, all right, what do we do now? We've been, we're very strong for hand harvesting, but the cost of doing this is at least three times what it would be to do like sonar or Priscillacor. So last year we did Priscillacor. The thing is, I guess the important point about this is it's a toolbox in our shed. And even although I demonstrated hand harvesting can work when it's done right, I'm super grateful that we have the opportunity to use something like Priscillacor or sonar, because this can get us back on track. So that's pretty much what I have.
Thanks, Eric. Paul?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Paul Derby. I'm president of the Glen Lake Protective Association. I've been working with the Association for Lake Management for 30 years. Glen Lake is also in the town of Queensbury. It's 320 surface acres. It's just outside the Adirondack Park. About 15 years ago, we had Eurasian water milfoil throughout all of the littoral zone of the lake. It was a mess. We also have curly leaf pondweed, which is invasive, and also brittle naiad, which is another invasive. So we have ongoing management strategies there. About 15, 16 years ago, we did a whole lake treatment with sonar. It was very effective. It got our lake back to where it was manageable. Since that time, we've been doing small areas with herbicides, less than 5% of the lake. And we combine that with hand harvesting annually, been quite successful. To be able to manage the lake, our native plants have come back, the number of natives, and so it's worked really well. In 2020, we did 3 areas of dense Eurasian milfoil we treated with Priscillacor. That was 3 years ago. Extremely effective. We didn't see any milfoil in those areas. The Alodia and our Cara came in to take the place of those plants. And I just went out last week at the inlet area in my little paddle boat to see what was going on. And there were a few scattered plants of Eurasian milfoil around after 3 years. But if you got outside the area, there are some rather significant Eurasian milfoil plants growing, because in our inlet, there is Eurasian milfoil. It feeds the lake every year, and we're not allowed to treat up in there because it's a wetland in that area. So we have ongoing management. But the Priscillacor areas itself worked extremely well, and it still looks like they're in good shape. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Jane?
I'm Jane Openlander. I'm a property owner in the Heights here, and I've been a volunteer working on the lake since the mid-2000s. My role today is to give you a little bit of the history of what we've done about managing the milfoil that we have here. This dates back to the late 1980s when lake users discovered a rapidly growing weed. They didn't know what it was at the time. And back then they just removed it by hand in front of their properties. And then it continued to spread. And it became clear that they needed a more organized effort as it continued to spread in the lake. And so a group of volunteers got together, attended conferences, consulted lake experts, and the weed was identified as Eurasian water milfoil. Fast forward ahead to about 2006, it continued to spread, and it was recognized that a lake-wide effort was needed to take care of the problem. And so after doing some research, a group of volunteers decided the first method to use this would be benthic mats. They were 10 feet by 10 feet mats that were sunk to the bottom of the lake. Divers put them down, secured them with cinder blocks. Workers and volunteers up above on a barge would hand the mats down. I participated in that, and it was dirty, hard labor, and exhausting work. The mats had to be moved periodically, and we did that for 2 summers. And I think we moved maybe twice, the mats twice a summer. We just couldn't keep up with it. It was just too much. And one of the volunteers, a quote that stuck with me is, "The grass was growing faster than we could mow it." So then in 2008 to 2009, volunteers again researched control methods, and with town support, got a permit and applied for and were granted to treat the South Cove with Renovate. And the South Cove is, I can show you the area. It's this area right in here. And it was treated, that part was sequestered by using a vinyl curtain that we strung across the lake to contain the Renovate was the chemical that was used. And it was successful. That treatment knocked down that milfoil in the South Cove, and there was little, if any, impact that was observed from that. Beyond then, we've been hand harvesting the milfoil to control it, to keep it from coming back. And once again, it's catching up to us. So that's a little bit of the history, but there's some constants that have gone on through this whole over 25 years that we've been at this. There's been a dedicated group of community volunteers that works with the town. The town supports this, and it's been a good partnership. And the volunteers change as people move away, pass away, age out, things like that. But there's been consistent interest in this. You got to keep up with the changes in the regulations, in the lake science. A lot of study goes on to look after this effort. We've consistently done plant and lake surveys, brought attention to the issues and efforts that are going on here through various media publications in the Post-Star, for example. And for the last 2 years, we've started back again with our CSLAP water sampling program. We've learned from going to conferences and reading that monitoring the water quality is one of the most important things you can do to get a long-term picture of the health of your lake. We were on about a 16-year hiatus from doing that, but we've restarted that in 2 years. So we go out 8 times a year as part of the Citizen Statewide Lake Assessment Program, and we do that. And it's important that we capture that data so we can monitor the health of the lake. You got to be adaptable to the changes that are happening in everything, regulations, lake science, your volunteer base, and it takes patience and persistence to keep up with it. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Glenn?
Hi, I'm Glenn Sullivan. I'm a project manager with Solitude Lake Management. Prior to 2015, I owned Allied Biological, and I sold to the group that became Solitude. So we've been accumulating companies over the last few years, and now we're nationwide. But I still work in New York and a little bit in New Jersey as well. You've heard some mentions about different herbicides, so I'll kind of give you a background on that. Since I'm last, nobody's following me. Feel free to interrupt with a question. All right, I actually prefer it. I hate giving speeches. So we'll start with Procelicor. Procelicor is what's called an auxin mimic herbicide. If any of you have lawns that you take care of and could kill your dandelions, when you put down your weed and feed, All right, the weed section is an auxin mimic herbicide. It's killing your dandelions, but not your grass. Same principle, all right? It's the same type of herbicide. It kills the milfoil. It can kill other broadleaf species, but all the things like pond weeds and naiads, it doesn't touch, doesn't affect them at all. All right, there's 3 auxin mimic herbicides that are on the market. 2,4-D is the one you would put on your lawn. Renovate, which is triclopyr, is the one that was used here back in 2010. All right, and Procelicor is the newest, and it's frankly, it's the best one. It's the best for a couple of different reasons. One, when you use 2,4-D or you use Renovate in a lake, you're using it in parts per million, usually somewhere between 1 and 2.5 parts per million. When we use Procelicor, we only need less than 10 parts per billion. So you're significantly less product, all right? Significantly lower concentration in the water. The other thing is it disappears so rapidly. 3 days later, it's usually gone from the water column. So the plant uptake is really fast, and your testing is significantly less. And just to give you a feel for that, we've treated a lake called Cazenovia Lake near Albany. It's about 1,000 acres. We treated it with Renovate for several years. And because that product stays in the water so long and you're using such a high rate, we had to measure the concentrations 21 miles downstream. And there were 2 farmers downstream, and the town had to provide them with water for, I think it was two months' time, because the Renovate was still there in concentration. We switched to Procelicor, 0.5 mile. So their costs went down, the expense of monitoring went down because it just works that much faster and disappears that much more quickly. So we like it for that. It's lower concentration. It works very fast. It disappears from the water column. Most of the jobs that are selectively controlling milfoil, which happens in New York and New England. If you go to New Jersey, they just want everything dead. So here we're a lot more selective. We want to keep our good plants. So most of those jobs have switched over from other products to using Procelicor because it's just so effective. All right. There is an expectation, I guess, that you're going to get a solid 3 years of control. All right. I can't say yet how much longer you're going to get because we've only had it out there. We've only been using it since 2019 was our first application in New York, and then 2020 in the park. Right. So we're still seeing how the regrowth is, but if you can count on 3 seasons of milfoil control and no harm to your native plant community, that's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. So I'll give you a little background on the process for the permitting. The permitting starts with a plant survey, and Dean showed you a picture of some of the plant survey that he worked on with Larry Eichler. So in 2021 in August, they came out and they measured 159 points in the lake and identified every plant that was there and the relative density of that plant. And that forms the basis of the application. All right. So that identified where the milfoil was, where the native milfoils were, where all the plants were. They ended up with, I think, 41 species found in the lake at the time. So we took that and part of the next part of the process is APA comes out and does a survey themselves. So APA came out and they looked at the survey, they looked at the report, and they questioned one of the plants, which is protected. It's called little water milfoil. And they said, we think there's more of it than the survey found. So we had to come back in 2022 and do another survey, specifically looking for that plant. All right, and that was a solitude project. We came out and did a survey there. We didn't find that plant. We actually found a second invasive milfoil called variable leaf milfoil that is in the lake as well. Now, I can't tell you which is going to be, if you leave them both alone, I couldn't tell you which will be worse because they're both pretty bad. But you do have 2 invasive milfoils in the lake. So what I did after that is now we have 2 surveys. I put them together and identify where the variable leaf and the Eurasian water milfoil is and start to create what I call treatment area polygons to know where the Procelicor is going to go down. And then you follow a formula that's on the label. So every herbicide's got a product label from EPA. And, you know, sometimes there's a range of what you can use it at. So for instance, on the product label for Cor, if you're going to treat a third of the lake, you can use 5 to 8 parts per billion. And that's a recommendation in the rest of the country. In New York, that's the law. All right. If that's their recommendation, that's what you have to follow. So it was easy to determine what we were going to use. All right. Based on the acreage that we had. The middle of the lake is deep. You don't have the plants there. We don't need to treat there. All right. But everywhere around the lake, or at least you can see almost everywhere around the lake, we had milfoil. So we're going to apply in all those areas. I think Jim had mentioned, or actually, I think it was Steve, that somebody mentioned that it's a short process. You know, we're not going to be out there for 6 weeks. We're going to be out there for 2 hours, maybe that. And over the next 2 to 3 weeks, those milfoil will disappear. All right. It doesn't happen immediately. It's usually somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks that the plants will just suddenly drop out. They'll drop to the bottom. Now, one of the questions we always get is, well, aren't you just adding to the bottom of the lake with organic material? Well, you are, but those plants would continue to grow and die at the end of the year. So you're actually adding less organic material to the bottom because you're dealing with it much earlier in the season. And for some reason, that just got me off track. Any questions? Yeah.
Someone mentioned it. Hold on, Mike, please.
Oh.
This is gonna be a pain. We do have quite a few people on the.
Glenn, I thought you had mentioned, or someone had mentioned earlier, that there were 3 levels of application. And what I last heard you say is that New York State seems to regulate what that application amount could be. Someone had mentioned there was a low level, middle level, and a high level.
So the label itself has a table on there, tells you based on how much of the lake you're treating. This is the range that you can apply in. So if you're only treating, for instance, at Minerva Lake, all right, where you're treating more than half the lake, we were limited to 1 to 2 what's called 1 to 2 PDUs, which effectively is 1.93 to 3.86 parts per billion. That's the rate we could use. Now, if you went down in New Jersey, you could use 3 times that amount because it is in fact a recommendation on the label. But in New York says whatever the label says you have to follow. So in that case, there's 2 ranges. As you go lower and lower on the scale of how much of the lake you're treating, usually you'll get more of a wider range. For instance, a 1 to 3 PDUs. Now you have a little bit more flexibility and you definitely want to be at least at the middle. Yeah. Did I explain that?
Yes.
Okay. Controlling, well, the DEC determines that the label is strictly followed. Yeah.
On the other hand, just so you know, several of the panel have stated that the state, the APA and so on likes to see a plan in place, not just herbicide, but we have contracted with our harvester, so he's got he'll have a contract with us any day now. It was passed by the board last week, so we can go back to suction harvesting this year if we have to.
Thank you. I'd imagine most here are following the legal action of what's going on in Lake George with Cor. I'd like to ask the supervisor from Minerva. You seem to have made reference to kind of a success story that you had in your town. How did you get to the point from neutral to generating support in the community for your efforts?
I think what I referred to earlier is the getting the information out and being really transparent with the information. You know, you want the public to do research on this themselves. You don't want your neighbor giving you advice on if this is a good idea or not. You want them reaching out, you want them coming to public hearings, you want them looking at the websites, you want them, taking the time, be open-minded. And that's how we were successful. Like I said, we have a very small town. We had 80 people at our public hearing. And a lot of the people came in there with a terrible attitude. They're, round up, so and so, but I think we won a majority of the crowd over by just, Glenn was there and Dave. I think, you put the science and the common sense together, but you make sure the people get every question they have answered. You don't want anybody to leave this room thinking, boy, I should ask that question about this or that, or what happened 6 months later or 3 months later. Get out there, let the people know what's going on. And I think you'll be successful.
Thanks, Jim. I'd just like to add to that. It's really important that you engage the people that are for what you're trying to do. People that are against something naturally are more vocal, right? And that means that the DEC and the APA are going to hear those opinions. But if you don't engage the people that support what you're doing, the DEC is going to get a very narrow view of what's there and what the community support is. And I've heard them tell me this many times that, we got 7 letters and they were all against the project. So clearly the community is not for this. Well, that's not true. 7 people aren't for this. They need to hear from 7 other people that are. So it's really important that you do engage people that are actually in support of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, on Glen Lake, one of the things we did is we surveyed every lake resident. We have 288 households. We have a lot of people there, and we had terrific turnout for the surveys. The overwhelming majority was in favor of our project, and that was very helpful with that. And I think another thing is that if you show success to people with what you're doing, then they buy in more over time.
Are there any recommendations in regards to the amount of the lake that should be treated at one particular time? Like you said, I think one of the lakes treated 60% or.
Well, these circles, sorry, I should have explained this better, but these areas are the areas that we're going to apply in. All right, so that's 32 acres of roughly 100-acre lake. All right, so you see the yellow dots, right? The yellow dots are where we did not find milfoil. All right, so I'm avoiding those areas and I'm putting treatment areas basically where you see the blue and the red dots, because that's where the milfoil was found. So that's how we determine it.
Right. And I have another question. You mentioned that the importance of notifying the entire community, and I know you said 97 homeowners were notified in Lake Luzerne.
Yeah.
So my concern with 2 public beaches that are, I don't know what the utilization rates are, but I know they're very crowded in the summer. Should not all of the residents or town taxpayers in Lake Luzerne be notified in a formal fashion through a notice so that they have the opportunity to voice their opinion too?
That's one of the reasons for this meeting.
Okay,
Just to get it out there.
right. But I know
Yeah,
you said
terms
the letters themselves were sent to the 97 landowners on the lake,
Requirements, the answer would be no.
right,
We want people to know.
right. That was just a thought I had. in terms of-
There will be a town board public hearing.
Okay,
That'll be on the website, it'll be in the paper, whatever the requirements are, the public notice.
okay.
Thank you. We got you.
Thank you. I think this is for Glenn. How is it applied? Is it a liquid, a powder, a solid? And the second part is more technical, I guess. How does it actually kill the plant?
Okay, it is a liquid. So what we do is when we go out on the boat, we'll take it out with us. And for this lake, it's 10 gallons. We'll take it out and our boat has a water draw from the lake. So we'll draw in and fill a tank. All right, and then we'll put the 10 gallons into the tank. And then when it goes out through the back and hoses that are dropped below the water surface. So you don't really see anything other than the boat. All right, and then we'll follow our GPS units that'll have all those plots on it. So we'll know how much goes in each plot, and we'll follow the directions to go over to that plot and treat that area. And second part was, yeah, how does it kill the plant? Auxin mimic herbicides, effectively what they do is they make the plant outgrow their food reserves. All right, and so what you'll see the plant almost elongate and twist and bend, and it's trying to grow more, and it's not able to grow anymore. So it's outgrowing itself. That's how they work.
The chemical itself is what?
Fluoropyroxidin benzyl.
And it stimulates something in the metabolism of the plant or what?
Yeah, but beyond that,
Okay, I can press ahead a little.
oh, great.
Yeah, basically what it is plants use different types of hormones to grow, to tell them how to grow. Say, for example, you look at a flower or whatever, how does it know to aim towards the sun? And all it is an auxin is one of those hormones that tells the plant, okay, you need to grow this particular way. And because this is a hormone, the auxin is a hormone mimicking compound, which really only plants use, it tells the plant, okay, yeah, go ahead and you need to start growing more and more this particular way. And just like he explained, it's far more than the plant has for resources available. That answer your question?
While we were discussing, I looked back at our application, and if you'd like to see a small video of the airboat that disperses the chemical, I have some video on my phone. You're welcome to come take a look after. Yeah, it was interesting because they do have a computer screen. The operator, there's two people manning the boat, and the operator has a computer screen that he looks at so he can trace where he's been and where he has to go to, so he doesn't overlap or double apply or make sure he gets enough in the given area. Secondly, I witnessed on the lake that the plant did grow. It seemed to overgrow, and it took about 12 to 14 days before it broke down and fell apart. So don't expect an immediate result, though 3 days it's gone from the water column. The plant seemed to stay there, and we were worried, does it have any effect? And almost on day 14, it just disappeared. And there's some effect, I don't know what it's called, when a plant decomposes, and it can cause a draw on the oxygen that's in the water, right? If you have enough plant decomposition. In our case, it had no effect, and our fisheries were never disturbed, and other mammals that are in the water, there was no issue with that. So we either didn't have enough volume or it was insignificant. So
Glenn, the other question I had was, how long do you expect this kind of treatment to last? I think what I heard you say was it's too soon to tell when you may have to come back and redo this, assuming hand harvesting gets out of control again.
Every lake is a little bit different, and I'm reasonably certain you're going to get at least 3 years out of this. Beyond the 3 years, I can't say, and it's going to depend on the lake. There are lakes that we've treated and seen 5 or more years of control with a different product, while a lake, one town over might only see 2 years. So it's going to depend on the lake. It's going to depend probably on the inlet stream. There's going to be milfoil. There's going to be plants in the inlet stream that aren't affected just because they're up in the inlet stream. And milfoil, it automatically breaks off into little pieces in the beginning of the season. So you can't just, we can't just close our eyes and say, we'll look at it in 4 years. You got to keep your eye on it.
Spring fed versus stream coming down. Keep mentioning stream coming down, but the large portion of the concern is spring fed. That's not carrying any plant material, it's just bubbling water up. Does that have any impact on it at all?
No, No, the only impact the spring fed might have is just keeping your temperature cooler, which is a plus. Yeah. Gives you more oxygen in the lake.
One of the things that does control how long your treatment is successful is any possible reintroductions. So, that's why boat stewardship, et cetera, especially on Saratoga Lake and other high traffic lakes is very important. And of course, on Saratoga Lake, even though we've been extraordinarily successful at controlling milfoil, it's still part of the system. Well controlled, no longer a nuisance. So yeah. But even on Saratoga Lake, we're getting, we get a solid 3 years from renovate. We've gotten 3 years from our Priscilla treatments. So, where it's applied, we continue to have good control of the milfoil. So its reintroduction is the big fear. And as the other thing always to understand about milfoil is that it vegetatively reproduces. Small broken segments will be new plants, new multiple plants. And that's the challenge with milfoil. That's why suction dredging, hand harvesting, and all those techniques are, difficult to manage and difficult to cause full elimination because little chunks are new plants.
Glenn, barring reintroduction, has anyone ever eradicated it out of the lake, out of a lake? Any community ever eradicated it, to your knowledge?
I was really hoping you didn't ask that. No, I've been managing milfoil for 29 years. And no, I've never seen it completely eradicated from a lake. I've seen it become manageable. I've even seen it become a normal growth plant in the plant community, but I've never seen it completely eradicated. Yeah.
Okay. In line with that question, what is the longest time span you've gotten from an application before you had to start worrying about
Specific to Priscilla or anything?
Stellacore? Yes.
Yes, we did our first Priscilla treatment in
Not that long ago.
2019.
Yeah.
So now I got a report that they were starting to see, this was down in Snyder's Lake, outside of Albany. And we did the entire perimeter of that lake. And I got reports that last year they were starting to see some milfoil come back, but I don't know if I wasn't able to confirm that. And I know that they have another plant called whitewater crowfeet that looks very similar. So I don't know if it's coming back yet, but so I think we know it's going to stay out 3 years. We don't know how much longer. Yeah.
So it's not a complete. I'm just thinking that last year at the NISFALA conference, there was a gentleman who talked about all sorts of invasives, and his basic premise was that you really have to continue at it. If you're using your chemicals, that's fine. Then you have to keep going with some other things and watching that it doesn't come back and so on and so forth. So that's sort of that'll be all and end all kind of thing.
That is true. Yeah.
You get a good handle on. One other question quickly. Why are the inlets so important? Is there something upstream that's happening or?
No, I'm sorry. I mentioned the inlet because that's potentially a source of reinfestation because the herbicide is not going to be up there. So if there are plants up there.
If there are plants.
Yeah, they would have the potential to come down and reinfest. Yeah. And honestly, that's likely to be the first place that milfoil comes back into the lake in a treatment area too, because even though the Priscilla works very fast, it's still going to be getting fresh water from that inlet during the application even. So, down in the south end, you're going to maintain your concentration a little bit longer than you are in that inlet. So when milfoil starts to regrow, that's where it starts.
Specifically for Lake Luzerne, there's not much going on upstream. That's why.
Sure.
Dean and I did a survey, an informal, but a good survey up in the inlet. And we didn't find any invasives. Dean, can you verify?
Right.
We didn't find any invasives. We went quite a bit. Well, we went to where it's blocked, as far up the stream as we could. There certainly is some invasive activity up in Fourth Lake and beyond, but that's a ways up there.
Okay.
And there isn't a lot of, way to transmit it down. So it's not a huge risk there. Before I end, I want to ask Glenn, what's the follow-up? How do you benchmark how well this worked? What will you be doing to additional surveys or what, and when does that happen?
Okay. I'm sure that the permit is sure to be issued will include another repeat of the plant survey in the growing season, a month or so after treatment. That's what it's been asked before. So I expect that. I don't know if it'll go on beyond that first year of treatment. The town of Minerva has been great. They've been doing it every year, so they can document just how effective it's been. But there will be a repeat of the pre-survey right after the treatment, so they can document how effective it was.
My question is it safe to swim in the lake immediately after treatment, or do you have to wait a while?
You don't have to wait at all.
You don't. So
No,
you
there's no restriction on swimming. In
Okay.
fact, we're using it at such a low rate, there's no restriction on drinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't affect any of the aquatic life at all?
Well, aquatic life, you mean the not plants?
Yeah.
Well, all the things that have been tested aren't showing any effects at the rate that you use it for plants.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Steve?
We were the We were the first lake in the Adirondack Park to get this approved through the APA. So Glenn and Dave, we had to go through the DEC as well as we had to deal with the Adirondack Park Agency, which it's not as easy as you may guess. But anyways, well, we had to prove that we had exhausted all resources to get the milfoil out of there, which we could easily do. We've spent, like I said, $500,000 in the last 15 years. But along with our permit, we also have to maintain doing studies for the next few years, and also a plan for some hand harvesting, which we haven't had to do in the last 2 years because we couldn't find a weed to hand harvest. So this year there will be a few plants, but that was part of our permit. But I think what's been really, we've had Glenn on board for 3 or 4 years now, and we pay him to do a study every year. It's nice to have that study. It's well documented. So we can maintain, some records on this lake. There's a gentleman, Brian Green from APIP. He's from the Adirondack Park Invasive Species. He's come down along with others at the APA. We've done sonar. We've done a bunch of tests on our lake. It was the test lake for the chemical treatment for years. And they're compiling data using our lake as a case study on the different years. And so 5 years from now, we'll have a better understanding of how well the chemical worked and for how long. But they're just compiling that data. I know Dave's working on it, Glenn, and this Brian Green. So we'll have a better, we'll have a good resource in a few years, or we'll have it done sooner than that. But we're gonna continue to monitor our lake. We're gonna hire a professional to do it because we can't go back to the $75,000 a year hand harvest. We just can't afford to do it anymore.
We should wait while you're at the gateway.
I read someplace that the first 2 years you didn't find one plant.
We did not find one plant. And when we did treat it, Dave made me roll around the boat every day. And the first week, the plants looked like they were fine, and then we're like, oh boy.
Like I said earlier, don't pay that guy, right?
We're gonna get a piece of this. And then one day they were gone, weren't they? It was just like one day they were gone. They were there one day, the next day they were totally gone. It was amazing, and for 2 years we did not find a plant. And last fall, I believe we found a few plants. Yeah. But we had thick beds. We tried the matting, we moved the matting, we had the divers. We were cleaning that out.
If it's okay with the group, I'd like to check,
Yeah, we have a Zoom question here.
okay,
All right.
is that all right with everybody? We'll fire that up.
Okay, we have Robert Stern on the Zoom. Did the other towns using Priscilla Core receive opposition from organizations such as environmental groups?
Of the three permit applications that I have in now, I'm not aware of any other environmental groups that have raised objections in our process so far.
I checked the APA website Monday morning. And they had 7 supporting letters and no unsupporting.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Chris.
Is there any concern about inadvertently culturing plants that are resistant, biotypes that are resistant to the herbicide? Yeah.
No, resistance is something that's built up over time from constant use of systemic herbicides usually. And to my knowledge, it's really only been an issue in Florida so far where they have, the whole year is a growing season and they're using, I think it was resistance to sonar, which is a type of product. But you're talking about a very low dose here, and you're talking about something that you're only going to use, I don't know, once every X number of years. So you're never going to have an opportunity to build up any kind of resistance in plants.
Glenn?
Yeah.
You said, how many gallons are you gonna use approximately?
A little over 10. This is what.
Oh, thank you. A little over 10 for basically the whole perimeter of the lake.
I read someplace that that's like 1 drop for a swimming pool.
Yes, that's about right. When we were doing.
There's the scientist in me bringing down to earth.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we were still treating Chautauqua Lake, which is way out on the west side of the state, with Navigate, which is 2,4-D. It's another auxin mimic herbicide. And we were doing about 200 acres with 44,000 pounds of material. So when we switched to Priscilla Core, we went from 44,000 pounds to about 30 gallons.
So you're gonna lower your price to us?
I'm sorry, did I say, forget what I said.
Is it, I got one more question, Glenn. Is it worth doing it 2 years in a row, though?
No, I don't believe it is. Yeah, there's not gonna be anything there.
I'm just wondering in case there was something there.
Yeah, I don't think so. No.
Thank you.
I think the APA also told us, I don't know if this was formal or not, that they didn't want to see us with another application for 5 years.
Is that personal?
I think they were talking directly to me, but no, I think they said, they don't want to see a chemical application at least 5 years from now. But the first 2 years, we didn't have any plants, and now we have maybe a few here and there that we're going to hopefully get. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can get 5 years without it.
Good.
And most of the plants that we found at the end of last year were not in the treatment area either. Yeah.
When we met with Jay and who was it, Lee Walrath came down from APA.
Yeah, we forced him to retirement.
But when he came down, he made the point that he wanted to see our whole plan. Not just the herbicide. And our lake association has been extremely valuable in helping us put together a plan. This is part of that plan. We've been going to conferences, Jane and 2 other Lake Association members have a paper's been accepted to the nice FOLA conference coming up at Fort William Henry. We took part in a poster conference. Is that Clarkson sponsored that, Jane?
It was the Healthy Waters Conference out in Syracuse in March, I think, February or March.
And I've been going to some meetings. I went to the Warren County Soil Conservation at I guess it's quarterly meeting last week, and the second part of that was the topic of, basically documenting what you see on that, map right there. The Warren County has a program and somebody dedicated to help plot all that information. So we're gonna see if we can tap into that to make our job a little bit easier. So, we have the skeleton of a plan together and we have the horses to pull it off. That's the important part.
Thanks, Jim. Stephen, when we went up to the APA last time to use the renovate on the southern end, we got the same sort of reaction, which was, we don't want to see it again for 5 years. And by the way, we accept your lake management plan and that sort of stuff. What troubles me is if you go to Paul's question of continued treatment over a scheduled period of time, you don't run into the problem that we've run into and that everybody else has run into, which is you ain't gonna win the game with hand harvesting and mats and the rest of the stuff. So is it short-sighted advice and counsel being received by the APA to us or not? I don't want an answer to that question. What my concern is that once you do something like this, what we did in the past didn't work. So Glenn, my earlier question, how soon again do you want to come back at this? And the answer is we don't know yet, but the point is you're going to get a laundry list of things to do and we're going to have to follow those like we did last time, but it was a losing battle all the way around.
When we had our treatment, the first 2 years, we had no complaints at all.
Agreed.
It would have been very easy to put our hands up and say, great, our lake's fine. But we continued to pay to have a study done so that we had the ammunition to go to the APA next time and say, here's our studies, and here's our hand harvesting plan that we've used after the treatment so that we can get another treatment down the road if we need to. But the cost, it was really, it got us ahead of the game. We were losing. And I think anybody that thinks that they're gonna pick this by hand and get ahead of it, I think is sadly mistaken. I really do. It's, we've been doing it for 20 years, Nate, myself and our board. It's just expensive and help that.
We've been doing it for 25 years.
You must be good at it.
What's that?
Oh,
Steve?
Yeah, I have a couple things, as far as dealing with the agency. Having the data to show how successful the herbicides are working at Lake Luzerne and Minerva and any of the lakes is going to be critical to it. Tracking any kind of reinfestation, having a rational explanation of why the reinfestation happened. Is it the boat launch? Did it float in, etc.? Again, is something that both the lake associations and the communities have to be able to do. It's just looking, watching, and writing it down. Writing it down is the critical part, so that you have an accurate record. The other thing is one of the unique things about the Adirondack Park Agency Act is that the board and the agency has to make determinations on the impacts to the resources of the park. And obviously the resources of the park are all the normal things we always think about the natural settings, scenic aesthetics, ecology, wildlife, habitats, open space, but it also includes the impacts on municipalities. And historically, that was always interpreted as development impacts on municipalities. But nonetheless, the regulation is absolutely clear, is that the APA has to evaluate and consider impacts on the municipalities. When municipalities are paying the bills, it's entirely appropriate for the municipality to say, we are paying the bills. It is costing us X to do it by hand harvesting, matting, etc. It will cost us this much less to do it with herbicides, continue to monitor, continue to track, hand harvest when we see the first plant back into the lake, and have that active management program. The APA loves talking about integrated pest management, and that's exactly, you don't have integrated pest management until you have mechanical, hand harvesting, matting, and herbicides. It's not integrated pest management until you have herbicides in your mix. They're just giving you a bunch of crud. So it's important to write down how the plant comes back in. It's important to map your success, and it's important to track it every year after you do the application. And it's important to force the APA to read the rule that says they have to consider the impacts on the municipality. And I did it for 27 years.
Thanks, Steve.
Another quick point, the state is fully aware of the milfoil issues along with other problems in the lakes, but they seem to put money towards prevention, but they never really help the towns with eradication of the plants. They'll give you money to wash a boat, but that's not the situation we're in any longer. The situation, once you have it, and washing boats is not going to solve it. So if the state would give us more money towards, the treatment instead of the prevention, it'd be really helpful.
When we go out to do the CSAP monitoring during the summer, we do look for things. We look for hazardous algae blooms, things like that, to be on the lookout. With respect to the milfoil, and you talk about documenting, how do you have experience or know what other communities do to do that beyond that kind of monitoring? Does the community do it? How do you record that, say, at a boat launch?
Yeah, so boat launch data is recorded as far as, that's on a statewide system. And like you said, is that, the state does support that. Most lakes that are involved with Eurasian water milfoil management or invasive management, do have some sort of framework of plans. They do tend to have members who are more enthusiastic, just as you do. And the critical thing is to map it, write it down, make it clear as to what you see and when you see it. Because that's going to be the critical part of the information to, be able to take to the agency that says, yeah, we kept on looking. We just didn't wait until Larry or Glenn got here. We, every month, the Lake Association, kayaked around and looked again. And it's just building that record. And then it shows that, again, that the community is buy-in to the management program.
Thanks, Steve.
With every time you go in there and collect the water, you should also do a survey of the whole lake. And if you have something that maybe is questionable, whether it's milfoil or something else, you can pick it up and send that to them. And otherwise just document, I see milfoil here, I see it there. If you do see it coming back at any point.
Right, we do
Put
that.
that
I was
as
just curious
part of
if
your-
beyond that, say at the boat ramp, for example.
Well, at this point, yes, you are,
Right.
but after, let's say you do get to treat
Right.
and it's all gone and then you want to keep an eye on it. If it does, you do see something here and there, make that part of your CSLAP report for that month.
Okay, thank you.
Can we pause for a minute?
Yep, we have to stop.
Take a
Chris,
break.
change the disc. Put on some more modern music, would you, Chris? I don't know about you guys, but I am learning the tongue here tonight. It's gonna help make a decision.
I'm not just speaking for myself, but I think I can speak for the board also. That the people, the volunteers that have worked so hard on our lake and other lakes to make them clean and to take care of this invasive species and to clean up things. All I can say is my hat is off to y'all and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Need me on the treadmill?
He's got the slow boat to China. What are you talking about?
We just got these 2 microphones earlier this week, so you guys are guinea pigs. This is our first public meeting where we've been able to pass the microphone around. In the past, we've always had everybody come up and breathe on this one.
And if you started karaoke tonight, that's going.
Don't worry about that.
Okay, we're rolling.
Yeah, can you fire up the Zoom person, Chris? We have at least one more.
Okay, so we have a question from Sam Zappis. What is the Lake Luzerne comprehensive plan to address milfoil? Can you publish on town website? Is it in the, I guess. Is it in the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, we have like a half-page discussion about it.
It is.
Hold on, Tracy. Press the name over there.
The Priscilla Core application is supported, that the town do submit an application for Priscilla Core and follow up with, continued monitoring and hand harvesting as necessary. So that's in there, yes.
What Tracy's referring to is for 90% of the way through the process of updating our master plan. Yeah, Tracy is our consultant that has put that together. In fact, today or yesterday, we got the almost final version.
Another question, Jim?
Sure, fire away.
Has there been a lake that required rotating the herbicide because of Priscilla Core's ineffectiveness?
Not at this point. We haven't been back to treat the same area in a lake or the same area in a lake. Sorry, we haven't been back to treat the same area in a lake with Priscilla Core yet. Haven't had that need. There are some lakes where we're treating only portions. For instance, Chautauqua Lake, where it's 13,000 acres and we're treating 100 or 200, or last year, I think we only treated 15. So there are different areas, but we haven't retreated anything yet.
Been a final solution? You haven't switched to a different herbicide?
No, we haven't had a need to use a different herbicide because the milfoil just hasn't come back.
For you, Glenn, we understand that the APA monitors for milfoil after it's supplied. Do you know of any other adverse effects in any way to humans, animals, fish to date with this chemical? No, the only, I guess, non-target effect that we've seen is in plants. So the water lilies in particular have shown temporary damage to the Priscilla Core. They're the same type of plant. They're a broadleaf plant. So one in particular, water shield, is probably the most susceptible next to all the milfoils. So that plant drops out and comes back, a month or 2 months later on. So there's not a long-term control like there is with milfoil, but some of your native lilies will see an impact. It'll be short-term. We haven't seen any other impacts. I guess the most common perception is that, you can impact your fish community. All right. And that comes from a lack of oxygen. When you control plants or algae, all right, as they die and decompose, are using oxygen. And sometimes, depending on how much you're controlling, it can affect your overall oxygen. I don't think I've ever seen that happen with a herbicide. I certainly wouldn't expect it to happen with Priscilla Core. That tends to only happen when you're controlling algae blooms. And frankly, not in New York. I've never seen it happen. There's no litigation out there.
No.
First time I've heard that question.
Hmm.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of questions. What do you think, guys? Any more questions? Would you join me in giving these folks a round of applause? They came here on a volunteer basis. Over on the table is the,
Guys are all,
is the piece of paper that tells you how to throw a comment into APA, means you gotta go home and do it tonight. Thanks for coming. My cell phone number is on the town website. You know, if it's really, really important, give me a call. Or call the town hall and we'll talk. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.